how are you compositing these shots? And because the way the
composite
shots
is all the same.
Wasn't a process.
We're still animating on paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no Harmony or Flash. The biggest difference is the backgrounds aren't hand painted. And
The boards are digital now too. Your boards were paper before. We do the storyboard pitches.
Yeah,
It was all pin up.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just a tool. I got to tell a story.
That's what you're here for.
This is back in the, I think it was in the early 90s. We were doing a show at Hanna-Barbera called Capital Critters. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep, I remember that. Right.
And it was a primetime show for, I can't remember the executive producer who had this big contract, so ABC had to give him a show. So,
Right.
so there were, everybody was gone for some reason. Like Davis was in Taiwan or something, and Bob Monroe, who was the associate producer, he was gone. So I had to call retakes. And we went through this series of one scene, and it was a really simple scene. It was like from going this way, from left to right. The mice had attached a gun to a skate because they were going to kill the cat, because the cat had killed one of the mice. And all they had to animate was the wheels on the skate and the guys that were pushing their legs. Everybody else, the gun, the ropes, the mouse on top held. And they kept doing everything straight ahead. So it's coming back like this. And I write these, no, don't do that, don't do this. You know, and it came back again, wrong. 3 times it comes back. So the third time I got the layout for the scene. And I drew lines. I say, hold this, hold that, animate the wheels, animate these legs, and then with a Sharpie with big black bold letters, I wrote, "Don't make me come over there."
yeah.
No, sometimes I wrote it in Korean because I can communicate them. And then my producer go to the Google Translate. They want to know what I'm talking to them.
What do they think you're sending, like some hidden code or something?
Exactly. They just want to make sure that.
That's pretty
yeah.
When I first started doing Dexter, I had, I was living here and I grew up in Chicago, so all my friends were there. And I was back there visiting, and one of my best friends were sitting talking, and he's like, "Yeah, I could write what you're doing. Now, Simpsons, that's writing."
Oh.
And I was like, "Really?"
Right.
You know, and because it's that mentality that just because it's for kids, anybody can do it. You know, but to write a one-liner is so much more difficult.
Right, yeah.
You know, and so that's not slamming Simpsons. Simpsons is great, but I'm saying they're equally difficult. You know, but that's the way, and that's the mentality in general, is because it's for children, everybody knows how to do it.
But it's not, that's the other thing, is it's not necessarily for children. It's for as many people as possible. Kids are part of that group, but you know, I talk to parents all the time. They go in and see a movie or watch a television show, and they're fans of it. The parents are more excited about it sometimes than the kids.
The kids these days, especially, they are sophisticated. They are different. They're a lot older, and they like the different things. And yeah, but I'm watching Fantastic Mr. Fox with my 3.5 years old. He loves it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just good story. I don't know but he's really connected, and then he likes to watching it. So it's just different. Like, you can't really guess what they're going to like.
The reality is, I don't know what you like. I don't know what a 5-year-old likes. All I know is what I like. And if you can tell a sincere story and you think it's entertaining, you're going to hope that other people will. And that's what we've always done. Like, if I can get the crew to laugh, then I know we've got something, you know? Because otherwise, you're just like, well, I think kids like cowboys now, so I'll do a cowboy show. And that's when all that stuff started to feel really insincere, is when you're pandering.
There were no executives of color when I was working on the Disney Channel. They had to trust their,
Are there now?
Who's Urban Central?
Are there now?
Right, exactly. Nah, I don't think so. But a lot of things, I would make as visual gags, so you wouldn't even see it in the script, but it would be just sort of this weird visual gag, for example, because you're the king of visual gags. We did this scene with Oscar Proud. We set up this dynamic between Oscar Proud and his doctor, Dr. Payne, who was like this sort of, makeshift Mr. T. Imagine Mr. T as a doctor. So we had this one scene where he had enough of Oscar. Proud, I had enough of you. And all of a sudden you see him rear back, and you just hear the slap, right? Because we could never do the slap on screen because of, S&P and all that stuff, right? Violence. So what I did was, you hear the slap, and all of a sudden, you see his wife and his daughter in the shot, and then in the shot color comes flying in the shot. And color hits the wall, and it starts dripping down with his eyes like that. Now for us black people know, oh, he got the black slapped off of him. That's what that gag was.
wait a minute, so they didn't know
They
what
didn't
that
know what
was.
that gag was. So to this day, that episode still stands with the black slapped off of Oscar, which is sort of like in the hood playing the dozens, I slapped the black off of you. So, I used to love doing stuff like that, that they wouldn't be in the script. But
Put it on there, see if they catch it, see if
they didn't get
get
one
it.
even script. It was like Oscar gets smashed. It'd be like that on the
Get
script.
it. There is women in development, but do you find it hard to get projects through development that you pitch?
No.
They love you? They love you, right? Then why aren't you running the show?
No, the thing is, I remember I went to the women's animation event about, Gina Davis talking about there's a so small amount of a woman in the industry and stuff. But to be honest, I don't really feel that way, especially being in Cartoon Network. I think especially in CalArts, we are 50-50. And then looking at the Cartoon Network, how much they develop, there is a handful of females. And but I remember when I started for the first time, I was really young right after school, and then I was developing the short. I was making the short with the Federator in Nickelodeon, condo building. I don't know you guys know about that building. And then I was just making copy or something, and then some guy coming, and then, are you a PA? And the first thing he's talking, he just assumed I'm young, female, so PA. Yeah, that was the first impression, and then I got, that's not really right. And then, yeah, but that was 10 years ago, and then I was the only one storyboard artist for a really long time. But right now, I see really 50-50.
You look around,
yeah.
I spoke at CalArts last year, and it was 65% women.
Yeah.
And in my class, our class,
Yeah.
in 1990, there were 3 girls.
Yeah.
So it's completely changed.
Yeah,
So the
that's
industry
great.
is filling.
You do see that. Yeah, I mean, even when I was over at Disney, it's like you see an influx of women story artists, animators. I mean, it really has changed. The dynamic has changed. I'm hoping that they take that dynamic and really start to give those women an opportunity to tell stories. Because Disney's in the business of Disney princesses. And I see now that they're really starting to, give women those opportunities, but you need to see more women telling those stories instead of, the 56-year-old white guys telling stories about, princesses.
yeah.
Right, you know what I mean?
When I was in Chenard, I think there was one lady in our animation, but our animation department was very small.
Is
very
that
small.
one lady still working?
No, unfortunately, she passed away. But I don't remember doing a lick of work in the time we were at Chenard. And the next thing I knew, she was an animator on Robin Hood at Disney. And I went,
Oh, fantastic.
how'd that happen?
Yeah.
And same with Dale Bear. Dale Bear
man.
was in my class, and
Yeah.
I don't remember
Dale's
him even
fantastic.
saying anything.
He still doesn't.
And next thing, he was an animator. But I've seen it all. When I started in the industry, there were a lot of women at the time because most of them, not all, but most of them were working in ink and paint because ink and paint was 98% women.
Yeah.
But I can still think of a lot of women that were assistants, were animators, and were doing design, doing layout, character design. And then I remember in the 90s when you came to the studio, they started doing this movement of we have to get a woman running a show. And my first thought was yeah, that's great, but don't just get a woman to run the show. Get someone who's good at what they're doing, not just because they're female.
Right.
Nowadays, there are a lot more women doing different jobs in animation than probably ever.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Sometimes I feel offended. They say, give more job to women. Not because of we are women, because we are good. We are
Yeah,
just
give it to the
should be
people who can do the
equal.
job.
Yeah, not just because
Exactly.
women. Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing. I worked with you, and I kind of worked with Craig and all that stuff. I still felt like somewhat of an outsider, only because I was older than you guys. I didn't dislike you guys, but I just felt like I'm not part of the group because I didn't go to school with these guys, and they're all younger. I felt, hey, great, terrific. Because when you guys came to the studio, everything changed. And instead of doing the same, cookie cutter crap that was been done for the last 25, 30 years, we started doing new stuff. I enjoyed it, and I'm grateful that you, the younger guys at the time, were allowing me to work on their shows. I got really yelled at by one guy once when we were doing the Jetson feature. Well, yeah, it's a piece of shit. But we were doing it. Well, there was this one animator there. His name is Frank Andrina. He's now no longer with us. He, for some reason, disliked me.
Right.
And I don't know why.
Right.
And I got I caught a call from Bill Hanna one day. I'm working at home. He goes, would you mind helping me? Which is saying, you will do this.
Right.
So I had to go and work with Bill Hanna each day, looking at retakes or just animation on the flatbed. And he would give me notes on what he wanted changed, because it was like anybody that was not in the studio, I had to do the fixes. I go, fine, okay. Frank Andrina, Slate comes up, Frank Andrina's, and I go, oh God, this guy's gonna kill me. So he goes, okay, here's what I want in this scene. I want you to do blah, 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 blah. So I do the best of my ability to do it. Well, somehow Frank discovered this, saw it like several days later. He comes storming into my room. It's funny now, but it wasn't at the time. He got started, always had a briefcase, and Frank stammered. But when he was pissed off, it was worse. So he comes in the room and he slams his briefcase down on one of those crappy tabaret tables we all had at Hanna-Barbera. Yeah. And he's opening. I knew, before he even said anything, I knew what it was about. He goes, did you do this? And he pulls out a scene, the scene, whatever it was, and I just turned my chair around like this, and I go, yeah. And he goes, what? And he started, and I go, I was just doing what Hannah told me to do. And then he proceeded to go, you are the worst goddamn artist in this industry. You can't draw muscle animation. I'm gonna see that you never work in this town again. And so I just turned my chair around and ignored him and kept working. And the guy that was sitting behind me, you know Mitch Walker?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Mitch was sharing the room with me. Mitch was like watching like this, and Mitch later told me what he's doing. Frank's going like this, flapping his arms, doing like this, and I ignored him. So he takes his briefcase and he leaves. So I thought to myself, well, that's bullshit. Why do I have to put up with that crap? So I thought, how do I get back at this guy? So I figured out, I'm gonna do what he doesn't expect. So he worked at home, but he lived really close to the studio, so he was there practically every day. Every time he came into the studio, and I happened to be walking somewhere, like you'd come around a corner and you'd see each other, I would always go, hiya, Frank, like nothing ever happened. Bill Shippen was in charge, I think, of all the assistant animators at Hanna-Barbera. And he obviously had a heart condition of some sort or whatever. And he literally died on the throne in Hanna-Barbera on the second floor. And Bill crawled underneath the stall to open it up, so, because he was dead.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. True story.
Wow. Interesting bathroom stories at Hanna-Barbera. I got a guy I worked for, Phil Mendez, a long time ago. You know Phil's story?
I know Phil real well, yeah.
So Phil was working on Fufa or something at the time. I mean, he was a volatile, but he's a great artist. Big teddy bear, basically. Big teddy bear hands. But his drawings, I mean, he was classic. His artistic hand was immaculate. But he didn't have he got kicked out of his office at Hanna-Barbera.
Oh, yeah, I know where this is going. Yeah, I know this story.
And so what happened was one of the guys walking in the bathroom one day and they saw Phil in the bathroom setting up shop, in the bathroom completely. On the bathroom door, Phil Mendez, it has the word men, and he wrote the word des on the back of the bathroom, door, because that was his office.
The interesting thing about Phil is that he's notorious for starting and getting on a project and then disappears.
Never finishing.
And never finishes and walks away, because I've worked on a couple of things with him, and that's always the case. He always starts and leaves. Very talented.
Extremely talented. His drawings are amazing. Oh my gosh.
And actually, he's a really pleasant, nice guy, too.
When we're working on Bebe's Kids, I brought him on as a storyboard artist. He gave me an invoice. I still have to this day. He illustrates his invoices. So the invoices were beautiful. It's like, yeah, you owe me this amount of money, but it's a freaking illustration. So it's like, whatever amount of money I owed him, I got back on, I got to get back on just putting that illustration on eBay or something like that, So Bebe's Kids was basically born from Robin Harris, this comedian who basically started this sort of...
It was his stand-up.
He was a Renaissance...
Yeah.
He was kind of this Renaissance comedian. He kind of really was what you see today in comedians like, Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley and Cedric the Entertainer and Chris Tucker, Kevin Hart, are all born from Robin Harris. And he just had this really raw comic talent. And what's so funny is that the Hudlin brothers were using him for this movie House Party, right? He played the father in House Party, which is hysterical. And so they were grooming the project Bebe's Kids, which is one of his comedy routines, for a live action movie. Unfortunately, he passed. And so the Hudlin brothers said, you know what, ding, let's make this into animation,
Yeah.
right? Which was fantastic because we're talking about 1991, 92. And then you got to consider just the landscape of where entertainment was at the time. No one was ready for anything that was sort of adult savvy in that world of animation. When we finally, got the okey doke to do the movie, one of the reasons why we got it was because the Hudlin brothers went all over town and pitched it to people who didn't understand it.
Half the stuff they didn't even
It
get.
just flies right over their head, and there's this cadence that Robin Harris talked with anyway that was so deep rooted in, South Central that you really had to understand who he was in order to understand the jokes. You just get the timing of the jokes so you know where to laugh. So I knew him. The Hudlin brothers brought it to the studio, and they were like, okay, he knows the humor, he knows the material, we can set up shop here. And initially we did it we were setting up as a TV series. But as I started to do all the exploratory work and stuff like that, Brandon Tartakovsky, who was head of Paramount at the time, they were looking to do, to get their foot in animation again. And then Brandon Tartakovsky saw this, and it was just all African-American characters. He was familiar with Robin Harris. And he was like, this looks fun, different, let's do this one. And so we just did it for a very small budget.
Why hasn't there been anything else like that since?
I think there's...
Because now it seems like there's a bigger audience for that.
Well,
or
what
it's
you've
more
got
acceptable.
now, yeah, exactly. I think when you look at just that era, 1992, and you just look at what drives pop culture. What drives pop culture? And hip-hop fashion, language, all that stuff drives culture, right? But animation has also changed. You got Pixar coming up, and they started to make more sophisticated movies. And also in this period, you're talking about from 92 to let's just say 92 to 2002, that decade, it was all musicals.
Yeah.
So that wasn't
Disney...
necessarily, it was a Disney musical. They ruled the landscape.
But I think now there's such a plethora of shows on TV that you can do that.
Yeah.
Adult Swim, Comedy Central, Fox, you've got so many more avenues where you could make a variety of different shows.
When we did, when I was on Quest at Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
that was the whole thing with Quest was trying to push it into a Disney formula.
Oh, gosh, I remember
and
that conversation.
everybody who was on the project, all the artists went, this is a bad choice. We knew it was bad. Yeah. Nobody paid attention or listened to us. And then when Brad came on and did Iron Giant and kept pushing back when they would ask, where's the song? Where's the love interest? And he's like, we're not making that movie. That's not the movie we're making.
Great.
And all the artists in the background are going, yes, that's what we want. We don't want to make that other stuff. And in the end, they kind of had to trust him, I think, because they gave him so many limitations. Like 1,000 times better than that other thing they were trying to shove into that formula. But it was so ridiculously hard.
I mean, that's what the mentality is. And I tried to understand it. Like even in television, I tried to understand, because it is a business. It's a business first, right? Beyond anything else.
Yeah, you got to make money.
Yeah, you got to make money. So I try to understand how are they looking to make money, And what they're looking for guarantees, So if we put all these elements into it, each step of the way, the named voice cast, superstars. All right, that's going to help us make $10 million more dollars, The proven idea that everybody knows, the recognizable IP, that's going to be another $10 million. And it's literally a math formula.
Mathematical formula, yeah.
And that's what's crazy. It's not about
Analytics and animation.
Yeah. Like when I did Dexter, it wasn't about I think I'm going to tap into the brother-sister relationship and everybody's going to find it accessible. It was just, no. I wanted to animate ballerina dancing, so I had Dee Dee. And what's opposite of her is a little boy scientist. Yeah. She's a stick, he's a square. That's literally the way it was. And then we start to fuse it with personality and character and jokes. And all of a sudden, accidentally, it becomes a hit. But
that dart in the dartboard thing always amazes me about our industry, which is everybody's trying to say, I know, I can predict a hit and all that stuff. But I've always said for many years, there's one group of people that decide whether it's a hit or not, and that's the audience. It's not an executive, it's not somebody in development. The audience will tell you whether it's a hit or not. They're the ones that decide.
I always like using sports terminology, right? If this were baseball, and you're working at Paramount, and you come to bat 20 times, at Paramount, you'd be lucky to get 2 hits. You come to bat in baseball, you come to bat 20 times, you get 2 hits, you're batting 100. You're not even close to being in the game. Animation comes to the bat like, Babe Ruth. Each studio comes to bat once a year, and they swing for the fences each time, right? We don't get a chance to make 5, 6 films a year. Because what you do is special. What you do is special. What you do is special. And everyone can't do that. But my mama can go out and make a movie tomorrow. Like my mama's special, but she's not, you know, an artist in that sense that could actually go out and make a movie. Animation is a specialized medium. I think that's why, in a lot of cases, website people turn their nose up at it because you don't understand it. If you're not a fan of it, you don't understand it, and you don't understand exactly what tools that artist brings to the table to make these films happen. These films are beautiful, and they're made out of pixels, and they're making you cry.
UPA was right next to the smokehouse, and their trash cans were right in the parking lot of the smokehouse, and we'd go through the trash can. Hanna-Barbera, before they moved up the street to where you were, they were down the street in a smaller building, and they had a big dumpster in the back. This is great. And Tim and I would ride our bikes there as much as we can. Like after school, I'd go home and I'd ride my bike to Tim's house, and then Tim and I would ride down there. And we were always pulling stuff out. We got chased away by Bill and Joe and yelling, screaming at us, because a wind would always blow through there. So there was always trash all over the place because of us. And they eventually put a big metal bar across the dumpster with a lock on it.
Were you the reason they did that?
Yes. Yeah. And before we took a big rock, because it was a hill that was in their back of their parking lot. So we found a big rock and we pried the rock into, so we could bend the top of the lid so we could reach in. One day after school, Tim went by himself and the bar was off the dumpster. So he took it home.
Right.
So they couldn't, for years he had that bar in his backyard, and unfortunately he doesn't have it. But we were going there all the time. We'd format films, you could walk right in, they would show you what they were doing.
Yeah. When I was at CalArts, me and my 3 roommates, parked on Riverside. We said, we're gonna go to Disney today. Buddy of mine, my roommate, his friend was working the morgue at Disney. So he says, let's go down to Disney today. I'm like, all right, cool. So we all 3 of us hopped in, 4 of us hopped in the car, drove down to Disney. This is before the new building, the Hat building was built. And so right there on Riverside, they used to have a big old fence. So we parked right there on Riverside, and we hopped the fence to get into the Disney studios because it was very low security. We was kind of like, 4 black guys walking the Disney lot. You know what I mean? And we walked by Glenn's room. So we kept meandering down towards the vault, which was right there on the lot. And CC, who was running the vault, let us in. And dude, we were in the vault, flipping through original scenes from originals, like original scenes from Peter Pan.
Old were you at this time?
I was like 18, 19.
I worked in the Sonoma building when I worked in the Gravity Fall. What is it, 2000?
Wow, geez,
2013? No, more than that.
no, yeah, maybe more than that. Maybe
But anyway,
2009
I
or
took
10.
my dog in the night because I forgot something. So I need to go back to my cubicle. And then I got kicked out from the security guy. Because I have a dog. And then now you're talking about...
I'm talking about listen, it's 4 of us down there. We could have walked away with a lot of hard work, you know what I mean? People forget that Disney was always shifting gears. People always say, yeah, it's hand-drawn. But no, all of his films shifted gears. Each time he put out something new, it didn't look like the previous movie if you had animation eyes, right?
They didn't want to repeat themselves. They wanted different artists to influence all that stuff.
Right. What I think a lot of people don't know about Disney is that he never rested on this thing that he did.
Yeah.
Like when they started doing Mickey Mouse cartoons, they were so successful, and they were doing black and white. And he's like, these are great, let's do more. And he's like, no, I want to do color. I want to do these musical, the silly symphonies. And they're like, no, and all the theater owners back then were like, no, we don't want to do that. This is gold. Why would you move away from it?
Right.
And he pushed it. That's and a few people talk about that and then he was, then the feature. We got all these shorts that are super successful. He's making tons of money. Now he's going to invest, take out a loan on the whole company to do this feature that nobody's ever done before. And that's
It was a risk, yeah.
It was a risk, and he was a true creative genius that way. And, and I feel like now in all these big corporations, people forget that it's the risk that gets you the big reward, not...
Well, I've said for a long time, it's most of the time we're following trends. But the big hits happen, you know this, you've been part of it, when you're setting trends. But it's so hard to get people to do that, to take that risk, to set a trend. They usually look at the landscape, what's successful. Let's do something like what's successful. Well, guess what? They've already done that. You need to think, what hasn't been done, what's unique, what's different, and take that risk. And then you're successful, but it's so hard to get to that
because
point.
they're not the artist. I think that's the essence of an artist. Like you just creative, and then you don't really like repeat themselves. That's the essence of it. But the older studio is driven by not artists. They are like businessmen.
Not all the young people that get shows and have a show and it's creative driven, it's not always successful. But it's a world of difference between when I started, which everything was king, the writers were king, but they weren't necessarily writing good stuff. If you think back to what was going on in the air, especially in the 70s, even into the 80s, it's not a lot of great stuff there.
No,
It
yeah.
was just all about selling.
It was all about, and it was different then. There was only
Yeah.
3 networks,
Right.
and the studios weren't owned by corporations, and the studios pitched to networks, but everything was writer-driven. So there was a lot of crap.
No doubt.
And you worked on the crap because that's all there was.
Dude, in the 80s? Yes. I mean, I worked at Filmation working on He-Man, She-Ra. I was just telling somebody about that just the other day, and almost cried again. It's like, I can't, it was painful.
Or animation or
I was in cleanup.
on cleanup?
Filmation was one of the worst studios ever to work for.
Oh my God.
Because they treated it like it was high school. There were no phones, unless you were an important person. And at 10:30, they went out, the following people have messages, and you would run down to the front desk,
Hilarious.
get your message, and then run to the pay phone.
Right.
Because it was a pre-cell
Dude,
phone.
so when I worked at Filmation, you had to be work at 8:30.
Right.
At 8:35, you getting docked.
Exactly.
So
And
people
you
were
couldn't
running
make up.
people were running into the studio to check in. You had to punch a time clock like the Flintstones and shit. It was like what is this? Is this an artist studio or what? Yeah, you had to
And
absolutely
you couldn't
do
make
that.
up the time.
You couldn't make up the time either. Yeah. So you get straight
it
up
was,
docked.
It was terrible.
It was crazy.
Wasn't there
Plus-
crossover with the two of you?
Oh, yeah, I share something in common with you. That
Okay.
We both animated on Pinocchio and
Oh gosh, yeah.
What a
Hush.
Yes.
Hush your mouth.
Yeah, well,
those
shit
words should
happens.
never come out of your mouth again.
It's terrible.
I remember that movie. But you know what's funny about that? I had to get
Nothing.
I had to get fired from Filmation to work on a Filmation movie as an animator. They wouldn't let me quit. So
What was the one you got fired from?
I was working as assistant on She-Ra, Princess of Power, and my supervisor, Doris Plow. You remember Doris?
I remember Doris.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I told her that, listen, the guys want to hire me as an animator. I was working assistant. I would be able to make more money. Still with the company.
Right.
I'm just making more money across the street working on this god-awful movie as opposed to this god-awful TV series. You know what I mean? It's like, she's like, no, you can't go. And I was like, well, what do you mean I can't go? Well, no, you're here and you're a part of this crew and you can't leave to go to the next crew.
Filmation was really awful.
They used to give you a test at Filmation when you apply for a job, and they give you the layout of basically He-Man coming up with a big sword, slicing something, right? I forget what it was. But I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna knock this shit out the park. I'm like,
This is just to put in perspective, after CalArts?
This is after CalArts, after Bluth, even. So I'm like a seasoned guy. So I remember taking that test, jumping in. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna give all this great perspective and all this stuff, and drawing all this, all up in your face, using the camera and everything, right? Peter Chung, you familiar with Peter Chung?
I know Peter,
So
yeah.
Peter Chung, like his tests at CalArts were crazy like that, where the camera would be moving and stuff.
Right.
He would draw great dynamic stuff that would just blow you out the water, right? I didn't understand why he wasn't in character animation, school of character
Right.
animation. He was in
It's
school of
experimental.
experimental animation. I didn't get that.
Yeah.
Because his drawings were so dynamic, it was like crazy and stuff like that. It was like, dude, it's on acid or something, like animating like this, right? So I just remembered this as I was like drawing this scene and animating the scene, animating the hell out of the scene, right? Proud of it. I'm like, please.
Yeah.
I hand it in. So there's like 8 directors that will grade your shot, right?
Yep.
Dude, I get my grades back. D, D, F, 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 D, C. And I was like, okay, one guy got sense here at least. Like, one guy got sense. Who is this dude? So I went into his office, because I was pissed.
Do you remember his name?
Tom Cito.
Oh, wow.
The only decent one there.
Exactly. I was like, okay, Mr. Cito, I don't know you, you don't know me, but you see something in my test here. Like, obviously, you see what I was after. What the hell is going on with all these guys? He's like, listen, I'm gonna tell you, this is a boys' club here. They see exactly what you're doing. They don't want you. Like, this is a good test. They don't want you. Just letting you know that. Doesn't mean you're a bad animator or anything like that, but I'm telling you, these guys don't hire guys like you.
Right.
Straight up. And I was like, wow, seriously? He's like, yeah. Don't even
what was
take
the
offense to
layout
this.
that they gave you for that?
It was
test?
just like
Just
maybe
one
3 or
drawing?
4 drawings.
Oh, 3? Because I took that same test.
Yeah.
And the layouts were, he starts in the distance and runs, your camera,
Yeah.
he runs up towards
Yep,
camera
you got it.
and goes this way
Yep.
and pulls out his sword.
Yep. And swings at something, whatever.
I
it is.
didn't pass the test either because I didn't get hired on that. But I hired me later for She-Ra and the others and all the other crap shows.
They hired, that's the test that got me hired as an assistant. Didn't get me hired as an animator. Animator was like, oh, hell no. Like, these guys were like, no, we don't want this guy. No, he doesn't get it. And they were just like giving me all this bullshit, you know, like.
But the funny about that particular test, the scene where you had to animate and going this,
Yeah.
would never appear in the show.
Right.
No, not at all. Like, the show is not even close to being that dynamic.
But you
know what I
knew
mean?
that. You
Oh,
knew
yeah,
that.
that's why I knew. They were like, this is a trick. They didn't want me to animate the hell out of this, obviously, you know?
And most of those directors couldn't pass the test either.
No. No.
Hannah was all about getting the shows done and money and all that sort of thing. He was aware of what things cost. So he's calling retakes and whoever's in the room with him who was taking the notes or the editor or something, you know, Mr. Hannah, I noticed that you didn't call a lot of retakes or you didn't call some retakes there. And Hannah went back through the film, showing him everything he could have called, but didn't because it was about money.
Money, right.
Wow.
Because the editor that I've worked with since Dexter, Paul Douglas, his dad,
Oh, yeah.
right? His dad worked for Mr. Hannah,
Okay.
Hanna-Barbera since, day one.
Oh, wow.
And he would just, in the later days, during the Scooby days and later Flintstones, he would just walk through and he would just go 10% retakes. That's all you get.
Wow, wait.
So it didn't matter. And so when you watch some of those shows,
Right.
it's terrible. There's like pops. Sometimes
Yeah,
Fred's
yeah.
in the. There's like some cartoon where Fred's in the elevator, then you cut, then he's not in the elevator.
Yeah.
And then the mouth doesn't move half the time. The pants are sliding all over the
Right.
place.
True.
Because they fixed the really bad stuff.
Right.
Right.
They had to pick and
You know.
choose.
So the first shows I did, there was no internet. Right. And so the current Samurai Jack is really the first show where the internet is hot and heavy.
Okay.
Right. And so I'm more old school where I'm like, nobody's gonna see that because there's so much to call to fix. I just try to get the headlining stuff. Other stuff, nobody's gonna care.
And then?
Right? And then for this season, they're catching everything.
No,
Yeah.
no doubt.
They're still framing every
They're
single
still framing
thing.
everything.
Yeah.
And it's painful because
Yeah.
even sometimes there's like a shot where all these assassins are hunting Jack and there's 7 of them. And one scene had 8. But I'm like fixing backgrounds and fixing animation.
Right,
I didn't
right.
even notice it.
Right.
Right? Because I'm like, yeah, okay, that feels right. And they're like tiny,
Yeah.
big down shots,
That's
spinning
fair.
camera,
Right.
right? And boom, there it is, all over the internet, all over the internet. It's
Yeah,
like
right,
on
sure.
a few sites or whatever. But it makes me feel like, wow, I'm like a hack. The best thing about doing the first movie was I didn't care. Like if I got fired, no problem. I go back to TV and I'll be just as happy.
Well,
you know?
you quit a couple times. You didn't
I
get fired,
quit
but
every
you
week.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let me. But that's the way to. I thought that was the best thing that I ever had directing a movie. Was I didn't care because like you said, like there's only a few movies being made a year, and there's a lot of people who want to be directors, and so once you get that job, they will do everything they can to keep the job, right? They'll say yes to everything, even if it's a bad idea. They're still going to do it because I just want to keep my job. I don't want to piss anybody off. And I was the exact opposite. I was like, I don't care, And so I had a lot of stuff to fall back on. So anyways, the way I used to describe the process was I'm in my car, all the signs are pointing towards me. I've driven many times. I've been driving for 20 years. And everybody else is going the opposite way, yelling at me that I'm going the wrong way. Right? That's what it felt like.
Right.
And so every step of the way, you have to fight for your ideas. I was pitching the story to the head of the studio, and it was, we were talking about like it's a birthday party, right? And first of all, the movie's called Hotel Transylvania. People come to hotels. We know the way a hotel functions. Right? It doesn't matter if it's a hotel or wedding. And then so the person goes, well, let's make it a wedding. But we just did the whole movie based on a birthday party, right? And the thing with hotel also, it existed for 6 years and 3 different director sets already, right?
Right.
So I knew there was baggage. And so all I knew was I started to realize they're challenging me on everything, right? So I decided I'm gonna fight back. Even if I agree with them, I'm still gonna fight back. right? And so for 3 hours, we fought on everything, right? So they go, we want it to be a wedding. I go, nope, it's a birthday party. And my boss goes, no, it's gonna be a wedding, because he works for the head of the studio. And I go, nope, it's a birthday party. That doesn't make any sense to make it a wedding, blah, 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 right? I would just fight, and we'd be like yelling at each other, and 3 hours, right? She comes back, she goes, okay, great, no notes. And my mind was like, they like totally got me.
Right.
And what I realized was they were just testing me.
Oh, snap, wow.
And if I failed the test, they would change the movie. But if I passed, and I don't know if it was a conscious or subconscious, I don't know that part of the game that deeply.
Yeah.
But after because she just agreed to all the notes, to that there were no notes. We can continue making the movie as is, even though everything was completely wrong at the beginning.
You must have had a hard time convincing Sony. Were they aware of the style of animation that you
No.
were going to do with the movie?
Yeah.
And how in the hell did that go over trying to convince them of the style of something that no one's ever seen before? Like you were doing something that was completely brand new.
Right, they didn't know. When I took the job, I'm like, oh, I can do this. It's Mad Magazine. It's really goofy. We don't take ourselves too seriously. The story calls for fun animation, right? It's real visual, and so it's Dracula. You can do a lot of zippiness and stuff, and there's a lot of fun you can have.
No doubt.
It's from that, the Tex Avery, Warner Brothers family. That's where
Definitely cut from that cloth.
yeah, that's where I kind of come from. That's what I love, right? The hardest thing was I know how hard, because it's all sculpting. Mm-hmm. Like every special pose, they have to re-sculpt the characters.
Right, I see.
Right? It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
difficult to do. And I want specific hand positions. Everything is broken.
I've stepped framed through things.
Oh, yeah?
No doubt. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, that's a blur frame. It's like,
That's it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a room full of people, the sweatbox, and we show the first sequence. And what saved me was everybody was laughing.
Good.
Because it was really funny.
Laughter is
That's what you
always-
want.
Right.
Laughter
And
is
the
cool.
timing is working. Not so much the executives, but because the rest of the room was laughing, they kind of joined in and they realized, oh, it's kind of funny. And so once they saw that, they saw it kind of working. And one of the lead executives, after they saw it, she turns around, she goes, wow, that's broad.
Right.
Right? And then I said, well, it's the right for the story.
Right.
And we have a lot of dialogue,
For a
and so it'll
reason.
make the dialogue more fun to look at rather than just
There you go. Right.
talking and
Yeah.
gesturing.
Incredible. To stick to that pose that you needed, and
Right.
people don't know. I mean, you and I obviously are avid Tex Avery fans.
Yes.
So, man, the beauty of bringing Tex Avery to the 3D world, dude, you knocked it out. African Americans in animation has this weird history. In animation has this weird history. That's why a lot of people stay away from it, just because of the shorts that were done in the 40s.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? The Cold Black and Seven Dwarfs.
Right.
But here's the weird part about stuff like that is Bob Clampett used to frequent all those
Yeah.
jazz clubs in the 40s and 50s. He was doing that
a
short
fan,
as
yeah.
a term of endearment.
Endearment, totally, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just that was the period, that was the time period that he felt like he was close to, and this was his sort of salute to all things African American culture.
Yeah.
So you can't be mad at him, but at the same time,
He was trying. He was trying.
He was filling the void that he thought was something that musically, one, wasn't represented in animation at all. Characters weren't represented in animation at all. These are sort of again, a caricature of people that he had seen in the nightclub scene and all of that stuff. So, listen, he's a true artist. I can't fault him for that. I guess the drag about it is that how entertainment for African Americans were during that time period. That's kind of what you were dealing with.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just an unfortunate time period, but it became somewhat taboo for all the filmmakers since. It's weird that, to me, and we always talk about this, me and my other friends, was like, how come Song of the South is the only film that Disney hasn't released on DVD?
can't find-
You can
yeah.
find it in Japan. Right. You can find the Japanese version, which you
I got
probably
the
have the
Japanese
Japanese version.
Laserdisc,
I have the
absolutely.
Japanese
Yeah.
version. But that's it. They're ashamed of that. You need to embrace that. That's just simply a part of what you were at the time period.
At the very least, talk about it. Let's have a talk about it. Why is it? Why are you guys afraid of it? Why don't you want to see what's bad? What's offensive?
The problem
let's talk
the
about it.
problem with Song of the South is not the execution. The film is beautiful. The animation is beautiful.
It's
Those characters are
content.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that Walt made this movie to appear like there were happy slaves in this time period, that he was telling the story. So all those songs and that whole, Uncle Remus thing was just simply about happy slaves, and that's just simply not what it was. But okay, but you can't erase it The crime is erasing it from film history. It's
Yeah,
like, don't act
let's
like
talk about
it
it.
wasn't done.
Good old Uncle Walt.
Right? You know what I'm saying? But he did a lot of innovative shit in that movie. Like when you see Uncle Remus walking
The
through
live
that
action animation stuff?
man, the blend in that was beautiful. It was,
And it's a shame that people can't see
and
that.
it still holds up. Have you watched it lately?
Yeah.
It still holds up. It's just those songs and everybody else, all the other black people in that movie. That's the problem with it.
When I make the short, Penn was, I mean, I went to school with Penn, but he made the Adventure Time right next to my door, so we just become friends, and then he wanted this character, Lady Reinakon, speaks Korean. So he asked me, like, can you do that? And then I just did, and then he liked it. And then they had a hard time find the BMOS voice. They couldn't decide, shall we go with a really deep voice or a really cute voice? And then he asked, just test out. And then I did, and then it just happened to that way.
But what about Gravity Falls and
Gravity-
Bear Bears too?
I mean, Gravity Falls is Alex Hirsch already kind of a big fan of Adventure Time, and then he kind of once used me as like one of the characters. So he just like, it was like, do you want to do it? And then I say, of course. And then that's how it happened.
And then,
I don't want to say too much because everybody like
well, wait a minute.
hate
You wanted
it.
to know. What do you want to know about Alex?
Tell me about Alex. Like what makes him such an eccentric artist?
I mean, I told you already, like, I'm the last person know what's going on, but as I like Alex, I know his last film. I think he was fourth year when I was, no, he was freshman when I was fourth. So
at CalArts?
Yeah, so we kind of missed each other, but I remember his film is excellent. He's an excellent artist. He's a talented kid, but he just didn't have a driver license. He was 24.
He didn't have a driver's license.
He didn't have a driver license, so he just.
I don't know if he has one now. I think people still drive him around everywhere.
Yeah, so he just lived in his office.
Oh, okay.
And then he worked crazy. I mean, we all been there, but he just.
no doubt.
I was going to ask you guys a question because since it's the youngest one in the table, like how much? Because I know you being an executive producer and then you being a like you used to run the studio and stuff like, but as an artist, like, do we have to aware of those kind of business perspective? You know, like.
You should.
Yeah.
It'll make you understand the industry more, and it's not everything is taken advantage of. And I see the new generation, and I can't generalize.
Oh,
but
go ahead. Generalize.
There's a feeling where when we were coming up, we were trying to get as many opportunities as we can, and you try to make your own opportunities. Like for Two Stupid Dogs, they hired an animator to do the walk cycles. I didn't like him. I wasn't in charge or anything. I was just a storyboard guy, but I didn't like him, and so I took it on my own to redo him. And I showed him to the producer, and he liked it, and that opened up more timing for me to do, right? And so, but I don't see like we hired new people for Samurai Jack, right? Almost all new people except for the core people that were doing it, and it was very different. There's that passion's not there for some reason.
You're onto something, because I remember when I was at CalArts teaching, a couple of things stood out to me. One, when I was sitting there with the kids and I talk about Tex Avery or anybody from the past, Chuck Jones, I got blank stares. And that surprised me, because when we started, I have this moment in my mind where I was sitting in my cubicle, there was hardly anybody else around, but over in the corner, I heard two guys talking about a cartoon. And it was like this relatable moment, and you felt like you were part of something bigger, like there's a couple of nerds over there that have the same feelings and they watch the same stuff I do, and you felt like, okay, these people get me. I'm part of that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But when I went and taught, and I would talk to the kids, blank stares, like, you guys don't watch this stuff? You guys don't know these people? What's wrong? So I spent half the time having to do animation history to them, which, no insult. The funny thing about the new generation is you have instant access to with the internet. Why aren't you watching it all the time?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
And then when Randy told me this, I came in and they did a lecture on Tex Avery.
Good.
To show them what a genius he was. That it's not just buggy eyes. There's so much more to him. But what I think it is, because I've thought about this a lot, and where we studied animation history, we didn't even need to study it. We came up with it. We knew it. I learned very little more because I was such a nerd about it. But because there's instant connection to the world, they don't look at the past. They look to now. So they look at all the contemporary people making films because they have access to them. Where before we would have to go to an art festival to see what's being done around town. Yeah. And so that's the way we saw those films.
True.
And so now that's where they're looking at. So like this new drawing style, like Adventure Time and all these other ones, they're inspired by more contemporary illustration.
Well, that's their past.
That's their past.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's the now where we were trying to grab a hold to those things that we loved,
Right.
to our nostalgia.
Yeah.
And so they don't need animation history. So that's why, like,
Oh, they need it.
They need it, but like half the people that animate or do backgrounds, they don't understand what a layout function is.
Oh, story.
All the technical aspects of it,
The
they
whole,
don't understand.
the whole technical aspect has gone out the door because I've worked with the young people who didn't have to work their way up through the system. Like you used to start out and you'd have to intern, then you'd have to be a trainee or something and learn from somebody else. Now they get to board, they don't have the technical skills. Then really what they're doing is they're putting it on to somebody else to fill in the blanks. So somebody else in another department has to make up for what they don't know or can't do. And that causes like a ripple effect within the production.
Ray Patterson, he always said two things to me before you leave the room. He would say, your job is to make that board work. And the last thing is you're walking out the door, he'd always say, keep smiling. He said that all the time, nicest man ever. But I think now I think it's very important to have come up the way I did because you learn everything and you have a better sense of what's going on and you understand the process better than someone who's got like 5 or 10 years in and they don't know and they're not really drawing on from any experience whatsoever, which always surprises me.
I learned a lot from him.
I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
And you know what I learned from him?
By the point
No, this,
I learned a whole lot from you. I step framed.
what I learned from you is that, you know, the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Not true. I'm the old dog and I learned new tricks from working on your stuff.
Genndy has a lot of influences, like a lot of us, right? So he took a lot of the things that he liked and he put them into Samurai Jack. And what's funny is the people who were unfamiliar with his influences credited him for creating certain things.
Randy, I created the samurai genre. Please.
Hysterical. Yeah, all right.
There would be shots and things, and they were like, "Oh, he did this." And like, really? Did you guys watch anything before?
Right.
Because Genndy, he's doing what all of us do.
He took it serious. There's a lot of things about anime that I think we haven't even touched upon. Like, for instance, in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill.
Kill Bill, yeah.
Like that one sequence, I'm convinced, I hadn't heard it anywhere, I'm convinced that the only reason why he did that in animation because he could not do that in live action without getting an X rating. You see what I'm saying? It's like he was trying to stay on the border of R and no rating, NC 17 or whatever. And animation gives you that flexibility of giving you like these really bloody, graphic visuals.
Yeah, because it's an animation.
Because it's
fine.
animation.
No,
it's not
no big
real.
deal.
It's not,
Yeah.
you know.
It's a cartoon.
And then he gave it a really cool cinematic scope, which is something that we're not
That's
even
what
used to
surprised
from an
everybody
American
about it.
standpoint.
Yeah.
The first anime I was introduced to, Raiden. I don't know. Anybody here say they know Raiden and they all up in my senses right now? I don't know. But Raiden was like this big sort of Voltron type robot.
Yeah, I know this, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
that's the first shit I saw, like anime. Like I remember watching it in my kitchen.
Not Speed Racer or...
Oh no, I'm sorry, you're right. Speed Racer and Kimba. Speed Racer, Kimba, you know,
Astro
Gigantor.
Boy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But like in terms of just simply flipping it from a modern standpoint,
Right.
like Raiden felt a bit more modern to me. And there was this Japanese toy store, believe it or not, in LA on Jefferson and Crenshaw. That's
What?
weirdly enough, that sold all those Raiden toys. And I was freaking out. I was like, how the hell did they get all these damn Raiden toys on
You
Jefferson
bought
and
them all.
Crenshaw?
You bought every
This
single one.
dude's selling Raiden toys and incense. Like, what world am I in right now?
So I'm in the kind of in-between generation. I know Tex Avery. I'm big fan of those. But I'm also in the new generation that animation is telling the story and then have a story arc. And every like live action would tell you to do that. What would you suggest, like where animation should go? Or what's your advice to the new filmmakers?
When we talk about Tex Avery, it's not like we're trying to do Tex Avery.
No.
You know, it's Samurai Jack definitely was not Tex Avery. You know, it's character first. It's always, and if it's an accessible idea. That's really the key. If you could sell a personality and like, oh, I like that person, you know? And so I think what you want to be is just sincere, and you might pitch 20 projects and none of them go, or one of them go. And sometimes that's enough, you know? And I think you just got to keep going until that one hits. But there's no difference between us and you, or even the younger generation, besides the fact that we have different influences, and you guys have different influences. And just, I mean, right now, it's the contemporary influences are what people are making. But, like, interestingly enough, the Loud House, right? Yeah, which is a good friend of ours who worked on Dexter, Chris Savino. Yeah. His show's really successful, and everybody is making kind of, I call it like just kind of weird shit. You know, it's like time travel and portals, and everything is like crazy dimensions, right? And it's all nonsensical. He just made about his story. He grew up about a family with a lot of children. And there's no magic to it.
Yeah.
Right.
And all of a sudden, kids find it accessible. SpongeBob's successful, it's a neighborhood. You know, and they're all like a family. And the core, I learned later, to Dexter's success, I made the brother and sister thing work. Yeah. There was all this goofiness on top of it, but at the core, it was that relationship. It was family again. So I think that's the key.
And the way they set it up at Space Jam was that, you know, this is between Michael Jordan's retirement, him coming back from taking off for about a year.
Line where he's like playing baseball.
He's playing baseball, you know, and he decided to come back. So that whole summer was the summer that we shot Space Jam. And so they set up this big dome on the lot for him to practice in. So they would have these little games that they would play, you know, like at the end of the day, they have like these 5-on-5 games, and everybody would come in town, sort of train with Jordan, because he was like the guy in the league. This big dome, you know, in one corner was his training facility, the other corner was like his gambling table, the other corner was like his putting green, because he was just working on his golf game, and then it was like the stands after that. So everybody would come and watch him play at the end of their shoot. And he would be playing against all the NBA players and stuff like that. So it'd be like an all-star game, you know, every night. So Michael and I would be like, you know, listen, I'm the animation director, so I'm, you know,
and you're like 6'4"?
Yeah, I'm 6'4", you know, some change, and, you know, played basketball in high school and stuff like that, so I know the game, you know what I mean? And Michael would be like, you know, wanting to know the process of animation. So between takes, when they're setting up new shots and stuff like that, we go in the gym, we shoot around, we joke, and I would be like, Michael, you don't want to see me on the court. You know what I mean? I would joke with him like that, right? Of course, I'm just joking, you know, whatever, right?
He called you on it?
So one night, you know, it's like the guys are getting ready to play, and all these all-stars are on the court. You know, Marcus Johnson, all these past all-stars are on the court, and they were short one guy. So Michael would always call me Cap. So he's like, hey, Cap, you want to play? You know what I mean? And I'm like, tonight? You know what I mean? Right now? I didn't bring my shorts. He's like, here you go. You know what I mean? And so I'm out there playing 5-on-5 with Michael. And as the new guy on the court, if anybody here plays ball, you know if you're the guy that nobody's familiar with, you're always the guy who has to pass the ball. You're the facilitator.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody knows your game, so you gotta always facilitate. So every time I get the ball, it's like, yo, pass. Yo, pass. But our team is doing good. You know what I mean? I'm not sticking Michael, he's on his own. So I remember game point, and we're coming down, and I'm like, I hadn't had a chance to even get my shot off yet. Like, I hadn't even had a chance to get my groove on.
Right.
So I remember coming down court, and as soon as I hear that, yo, pass the ball, I'm like, no, I'm gonna get me a shot off before this game is done, right? So I remember putting the ball through my legs and going to the basket, and shit started happening. Like, people started moving around and setting screens and all of this stuff, right? So I'm like, I look up, I'm like, oh, clear path to the basket, let me go. So I'm going to the basket, right?
I see it coming.
I get a screen, and then off the screen comes Michael Jordan. And I'm like, oh no! And I'm like, what do I do now? He's coming, and I'm like going to the basket, and we go to the basket at the same time, tongue out, so I know I'm like about to get handled, right? I'm going to the basket, Michael going to the basket, it was all in slow motion, right? And I'm like, I remember this dome being pristine white and like darts going off, lights going off in the sky, and here I am going against Michael Jordan coming off the screen, and I just remember closing my eyes going, turning around, 360, throw it up, and I just remember hearing everybody going, ooh, damn! So now you gotta understand. When you ever see like the David Blaine specials?
Yeah.
You ever see when black people see magic?
Yeah.
Right.
Like black people see magic, they run. Like they run away, right? It was as if It was a David Blaine special, and black people saw magic. So black people just started running away. And I knew right then, I didn't know if the ball went in the basket or whatever, right? Ball went in the basket, right? Game point, game over. Everybody's like, ooh, running away. And so if you ever play ball, you gotta, act like you've done this before. You can't be surprised too.
Too bad
You see what I'm
there's
saying?
no Instagram
Yeah.
at the
So
time.
you gotta act like I've done this before. So I'm like running down court, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
game over.
No problem.
Game over.
No
No
big
problem.
deal.
Game over, right?
Been here before.
And one of the acting coaches for Michael, T.K. Carter, I remember he's out there, he was like, ooh, Michael, you let the cartoon guy score on you, which was awful for Michael, right? So then I'm running down court like I've done this before, and I'm like, whatever. Michael stops me dead in my tracks, looks at me up and down and says, you mother...
Randy.